Hi everyone, this is Michal from Airhead, and today we'll go through the most recent questions from the subject of aircraft general knowledge, and more specifically, hydraulics. So this one is really important for your future flying, especially as you'll fly the big commercial jets, which have very elaborate systems, but as well as the smaller aircrafts, they will make use of some type of hydraulic systems, so it's good to know the components and the general principles. So let's just jump into the questions, and I'll try to give you some extra tips and explain the topics of what has been seen in the most recent exams across all EASA authorities. So for question number 1, the purpose of an accumulator in a hydraulic system is to. So what is an accumulator? A lot of people confuse an accumulator with some type of a battery. And actually, in a way, this is a good analogy. So for the exams, remember, accumulator is a store of energy. So it does store some of the fluid. However, primarily it stores energy within the system, and it has 5 key components and 5 key purposes. And these are to allow for thermal expansion, as well as allow for some small leaks, because it can give back the energy to the system. The general rule of thumb is that in case of a failure, the accumulator can actually allow us for 6 uses of the brakes. So we can step on the brakes 6 times. After this, there is not enough power in the system, not enough energy in the system for the accumulator to make up for it. It can also store some fluid under pressure and dampen the pressure fluctuations and provide some fluid in case of losses. However, of course, an accumulator is an emergency last resort system. And also remember for the exams that the accumulator will show a pre-charged pressure reading when it's off, and then as the systems spool up in an aircraft, then we'll always see the pressure reading of the overall general system rather than one pre-charging the accumulator. So going back to the question, the purpose of an accumulator in a hydraulic system will be to damp pressure fluctuations and serve as a limited alternate source of pressure, of course. For question number 2, a hydraulic system works on the principle that. So for the questions regarding the principle of hydraulic systems, always look for incompressible fluid as a keyword. The whole idea behind hydraulic systems is that the fluid is not or almost not compressible, so that we can transfer the energy from one point to another with differences in force compared to the one applied to the one that is output later by the actuators. And of course, in this particular example, the forces transmitted for an incompressible fluid will be the correct one, as if the fluid was compressible, then we would not be able to take any advantage of any hydraulic system. And of course, for the other questions, large input force produces a small output force. This would be the opposite if we are playing with different areas. And actuator movement is dependent on reservoir air pressure. This is incorrect, as of course, the reservoir air pressure is always at the end of a hydraulic lines or hydraulic system. For question number 3, to protect against excessive system pressure, a hydraulic system usually incorporates. Of course, as we said before, an accumulator, it stores pressure. It will give us some energy in case of leak or pressure loss. So this will not protect us against excessive system pressure. And this will be done by a high pressure relief valve. And the relief valves are, for example, found in reservoirs where they are pressurized most often by the bleed air taken from the engine. And in order to prevent overpressurization, you'll find relief valves there. So these relief valves will be tuned to a certain pressure, and they will open if the pressure is above the limit, relieving the pressure and making sure there is no issues with overpressurization within the system. For question number 4, parameters to monitor a hydraulic system in the cockpit are. So this question is actually quite straightforward, and the right answer will be pressure, fluid temperature, and quantity. For example, if you open an engine page in an Airbus A320, you'll see that the quantity of oil will be given in quarters of a gallon, and this has to be monitored in order to make sure that we have enough of the fluids in the system to operate safely, as well as to monitor for any leaks. And then also remember that the pressure and temperature readings will be always, the sensors will be always placed right after the pump. So of course, if we have an increased temperature or changes in pressure, this will be a first indication that something is wrong with the pump, or that pump is going too fast. And this can of course give us a conclusion that there is a leak because the pump is trying to compensate for it. It simply cannot, because the fluid amount is decreasing within the system. So these three will be the correct answer. And of course, the hydraulic pump output, we do not monitor this, but we can get an indirect reading via pressure and fluid temperature, which are taken out from right after where the pump is. For question number 5, another name for a non-return valve is, so we have quite a few valves here, and I highly recommend that you study all of them. Of course, a non-return valve is a check valve. This is a valve that lets fluid through only one way, so similar to a diode in an electrical system. And the check valves are very popular, especially in the braking system and the smaller aircraft. So as you will slow down and as you will stop and engage a parking brake in a small light aircraft, then most often you'll need to pump and press on the brakes a couple times with your feet in order to pressurize the system. That will go through these check valves because it will let the fluid inside, and then it will not let it out. So you'll pump it and the pressure will increase, making for a safe and good parking brake engagement. A restrictor valve here, for example, it has a slightly different purpose. The restrictor valve will restrict the speed of the fluid flowing, so it will not make it not come back or not return, but it will decrease the speed. That's what the restrictor valve does. And lastly, the shuttle valve. Shuttle valve will be used mainly in emergencies. So for example, if there is a need for emergency gear extension, then the shuttle valve will be engaged. The shuttle valve will always give you the pressure from the strongest source. So if you have multiple sources from which the pressure is coming, then the shuttle valve will make sure that the system receives the pressure from the strongest, most energized hydraulic line. And lastly, the question about the stand or stuck pipe on a supply line inside the reservoir. And what is the purpose of the stuck or stand pipe in a reservoir of our hydraulic system? So our hydraulic our reservoir inside of our hydraulic system will store hydraulic fluid in order to allow for some thermal expansions, as well as to provide the fluid for the system generally. And like I mentioned before, these systems are pressurized to some extent, most often with the engine's bleed valve. And how the system works is that within a big bucket, there are two lines. One is standing slightly above the bottom of the reservoir, and one is at the very bottom of the reservoir. So the line that is standing up, the pipe that is standing up, is called a stand or stuck pipe. So what it does, this takes the fluid from the reservoir and puts it into our main hydraulic system in order for us to have proper working hydraulic system, hydraulic line. However, the main reason it exists is because in case there is an emergency, in case there is a problem or a leak within our main system, then the entire fluid will not go out because it's taken from a certain height in the reservoir. And this is the key and primary reason we have this system. Because if there is a leak in our main line, if the fluid was taken from the bottom of the reservoir, then very easily the entire thing could just simply drain out. And the emergency line will most often be powered by emergency pumps or hand-driven pumps. However, this will be the main reason we have a stuck pipe in our reservoir. But of course, there's also an added value to this, because all the sediments and contamination that is within our line or within the reservoir will drop to the bottom, and the stuck pipe will not catch it. So we will be having mainly clean or clear hydraulic fluid within the system. But this is an extra. This is something that's an added value. The key reason we have it is for us to have an emergency supply or some form of a barrier between one system and another within the reservoir itself. So the right answer will be the one referring to an emergency hydraulic system operation, and this will be the main answer. However, there is a second reason it exists, but the emergency hydraulic system operation will be the key one in this case. And this is everything from the hydraulic systems for the AGK. For the latest questions, I hope this was helpful. I hope I was able to give you some extra information and provide value. Wish you all the best with your studies and exams, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye-bye.